Hello, welcome to my channel. Today, we explore an interesting topic in Stoicism, philosophy, and psychology, one that has the power to change your life. Don't skip any part of this video, watch it till the end to get the full value. If you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave a comment with your valuable opinion. Now, let's begin the main video. Today, we'll explore the core of Stoic philosophy.
You wake up every day believing you're in control. Control of your plans, control of your emotions, control of how life should go. And then life happens. A message you didn't expect, a delay you didn't plan for, a reaction you wish you didn't have. Suddenly, your mood changes, your energy drops, your peace disappears. Not because something terrible happened, but because something unplanned did. Most people never notice this pattern. They blame traffic. They blame people, blame bad luck. But the truth is quieter and harder to accept. You are not disturbed by events. You are disturbed by your need to control them. Think about how fragile that makes your peace. One comment can ruin your day. One delay can trigger anger. One comparison can steal your confidence. That means your emotions are being controlled by things outside you. It's anything controlled by the outside world. It's never truly yours. The Stoics saw this clearly long before phones, deadlines, and social media. They lived through wars, exile, disease, betrayal. Yet they asked a simple, uncomfortable question. What is actually under my control? Not outcomes, not people, not opinions, not the past. It's not the future. Only this, your judgment, response, your inner posture toward life. Everything else is borrowed, temporary, unreliable. When you try to control what was never yours, suffering begins. Frustration becomes routine. Anger feels justified. Anxiety feels unavoidable. But here's the quiet shift that changes everything. The moment you stop demanding that life obey you, you regain power over yourself. And that power is the beginning of being untouchable. In the next part, we'll uncover why emotions feel uncontrollable and how most people unknowingly train themselves to suffer every single day. 2. How the mind creates suffering. You don't suffer because life is difficult. You suffer because your mind reacts before you have a chance to choose. This happens so fast that most people never notice it. An event occurs, a thought appears, an emotion follows. And suddenly you're no longer presents your inside a story. That story feels real, urgent, personal, but it's not reality, it's interpretation. Think about the last time you felt angry. Was it the event itself that hurt you? Or the meaning you assigned to it? A message left unread, comment said without care, plan that fell apart. None of these contain emotion by themselves. They are neutral facts. The emotion arrives only after your mind says something like, disrespected me. This means I'm failing. I'm not important. That sentence, quiet, automatic, unquestioned, is where suffering begins. The Stoics were obsessed with this moment, not because they wanted to suppress emotion, but because they saw how emotions hijack the mind when left unexamined. Epictetus made a sharp distinction. There is the event, and there is the judgment about the event. Confuse the two, and you live in emotional chaos. Separate them. You regain clarity. Most people never separate them. They say, I'm angry because he insulted me, but that's not true. Someone spoke words. Your mind decided those words meant something threatening. Anger followed. If words alone had power, everyone would react the same way, but they don't. One person laughs, another explodes, another shrugs and moves on. Same words, different minds. That tells you something important. Emotion is not forced upon you. It is generated within you, and anything generated can be trained. But first, you have to see how deeply automatic your reactions are. From childhood, you were conditioned, rewarded for approval, punished for mistakes, taught to fear rejection, taught to chase validation. Over time, your nervous system learned patterns. Threat equals danger. Disapproval equals pain. Uncertainty equals anxiety. So now, as an adult, your body reacts faster than your reason. Your heart races before you think. Your jaw tightens before you reflect. Your mood shifts before you choose. You call this just how I am. The Stoics would say, this is how you were trained, and training can be undone. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself, you don't have to turn this into something. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every emotion deserves obedience. The mind throws impressions at you all day. Some are useful. Many are distorted. Most are unnecessary. But if you believe every thought, you become a servant to your own mind. That's the hidden tragedy. People think they are thinking, but most of the time, they are reacting. Reacting to memories. Reacting to fears. Reacting to imagined futures. They suffer over things that never happened. They relive moments that are already over. Seneca warned about this exact habit. He observed that people exhaust themselves mentally by dragging the past and future into the present moment. Regret steals peace backward. Anxiety steals it forward. And the present, the only place you can act, gets neglected. Your mind becomes a battlefield because it's never where your body is. Stoicism brings the mind back. Not forcefully, not violently, but through awareness. The moment you notice a thought, instead of believing it, something shifts. You are no longer inside the storm. You are watching it. This doesn't mean emotions vanish. It means they lose authority. Anger may arise, but it no longer commands your behavior. Fear may whisper, but it no longer decides your actions. This is the beginning of inner freedom, but it requires honesty. You must admit that much of your suffering is self-created, not intentionally. Not maliciously, but habitually. The mind loves drama. It exaggerates, it catastrophizes, it assumes the worst. Why? Because it thinks it's protecting you. Fear evolved to keep you alive, not to make you peaceful. Your brain is excellent at spotting danger, terrible at judging relevance. So it treats a social rejection like a physical threat. It treats uncertainty like imminent disaster. And unless you intervene, it will run unchecked. The Stoics didn't fight this directly, they questioned. They asked, is this thought true? Is this useful? Is this within my control? Most thoughts fail these tests, but because people never ask, they suffer endlessly. Here's something most people never realize. You don't need to stop negative thoughts. You just need to stop agreeing with them. A thought can appear without permission. Your belief is optional. That gap between appearance and agreement is where strength lives. Most people collapse the two. A thought appears. I'm not good enough. They accept it instantly. Emotion follows. Behavior follows. Stoicism slows this process. It teaches you to say, that's a thought, not a fact. That sentence alone can save years of unnecessary suffering. Marcus Aurelius practiced this relentlessly. He stripped events of interpretation. Not I was insulted, but someone spoke words. Not I failed, but the outcome wasn't what I preferred. This isn't denial, it's precision, and precision is power. When you stop adding unnecessary meaning, emotions lose fuel, anger burns out faster, fear loses its grip. Sadness becomes lighter, not because life is easier, but because your mind is clearer. Most emotional pain comes from exaggeration. This always happens. I'll never recover. This proves something about me. The Stoics called this mental inflation. Taking a moment and turning it into an identity. Taking a setback and turning it into a life sentence. But when you observe closely, most problems are smaller than they feel. They feel large because your mind zooms in and refuses to zoom out. Stoicism trains perspective. It reminds you that this moment will pass. This emotion will fade. This event will soon be replaced by another. Nothing lasts long. Enough to justify losing yourself over it. Even intense pain changes. But only if you stop feeding it. With stories, here's where the human part comes in. You don't need to be perfect at this. You will still react sometimes. You will still get caught in emotion. You will still forget. The Stoics forgot too. That's why they wrote reminders. Daily reflections. Personal warnings. Stoicism isn't about mastery overnight. It's about noticing sooner. Noticing when you're spiraling. Noticing when a thought is pulling you away. Noticing when emotion is asking for obedience. Each time you notice, you weaken the habit. Each time you pause, you strengthen choice. And over time, your default changes. What once triggered panic, now triggers reflection. What once triggered anger, now triggers curiosity. Not because life improved, because you did. This is the quiet power of Stoicism. It doesn't shout. It doesn't promise miracles. It gives you something far better. Stable center. A place inside that doesn't collapse when circumstances shift. In the next part, we'll confront one emotion that destroys more lives than almost any other: anger. 3. Anger. The emotion that steals your power. Anger doesn't arrive screaming. Most of the time it whispers. It feels justified, reasonable, even necessary. You tell yourself it's strength, that it protects you, that it proves you won't be disrespected. But anger is a liar. It doesn't protect your power. It hands it away. Think about the last time anger took over. What did it give you afterward? Clarity, peace, control, or regret, exhaustion, and words you wish you could take back. Anger promises relief, but delivers damage. The Stoics saw anger as one of the most dangerous emotions, not because it appears strong, because it feels right. Marcus Aurelius warned himself constantly about it. Not because he was weak, but because he knew how seductive anger can be. Anger convinces you that reaction is justice, that intensity equals truth, that losing control is somehow a form of control. But look closely. When you're angry, are you more intelligent or less? More effective or more reckless? Anger narrows vision, speeds the heart and clouds judgment, turns small issues into personal attacks, and worst of all, it makes you predictable. Anyone who can trigger your anger can control you. That's not strength, it's vulnerability. Most people never question anger. They ask, do I have a right to be angry? Stoicism asks a better question. What does anger cost me? Because even when anger feels justified, it is rarely useful. Seneca, who wrote extensively about anger, called it a form of temporary madness, not because it feels wild, but because it disconnects you from reason. You say things you don't mean. You take actions you wouldn't choose calmly. You damage relationships over moments that don't last, and then anger leaves, but consequences remain. The insult fades, the situation passes, but the damage you caused stays. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Anger is not caused by others. It is caused by your interpretation of their actions. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Words are spoken. Messages are ignored. None of these contain anger. Anger arrives only after your mind says, they disrespected me. They shouldn't act this way. This is unacceptable. That judgment is the spark. Remove the spark, and the fire dies. The Stoics trained themselves to interrupt this process, not by suppressing anger, by questioning it before it fully forms. They understood something most people don't. The first, impulse is automatic. The second is optional. You can't stop the initial surge, but you can stop feeding it. Most people feed anger instantly. They replay the event. They imagine confrontations. They justify their reaction. Each thought adds fuel. Stoicism teaches restraint at the level of thought. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself how much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks. Anger often comes from focus on others, what they did, what they meant, what they should have done differently. But the moment your attention moves outward, your peace follows. Stoicism brings attention back inward, not to ego, but to agency. What part of this is actually mine? You don't control others' behavior. You don't control their awareness, upbringing, or intentions. Expecting perfection from imperfect beings is a guaranteed source of anger. The Stoics expected flaws, they prepared for them. Marcus Aurelius began his days reminding himself that people would be selfish, ungrateful, rude, not to excuse behavior, but to prevent surprise, because surprise fuels anger. When you expect resistance, resistance loses power. Another hidden source of anger is pride, not confidence, but the fragile kind. The belief that you should not be challenged, delayed, ignored, or corrected. Anger often says, "How dare they?" Oh, that sentence reveals attachment to ego, to identity, to status, to self-image. The Stoics warned against this. They saw ego as a weak point. The more you need to be respected, the more easily you are offended, the more you need control, the more easily you are angered. True strength doesn't demand obedience. From the world it adapts. Epictetus was born a slave. He had every reason to be angry at life, yet he taught that no one can harm you unless you allow their actions to disturb. Your mind, that wasn't denial. That was defiance. Defiance against emotional slavery. Anger tells you that reacting proves your power. Stoicism shows you that restraint is power. Think of the strongest people you know. Are they explosive, reactive, easily offended? Or are they calm, measured, difficult to provoke? Silence under pressure is not weakness, it is dominance over self. Anger feels immediate, control feels slow, but control lasts. Anger gives a brief sense of release, then leaves emptiness. Control gives dignity. Here's the shift Stoicism invites. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" ask, "How will I respond to this?" That question restores choice, and choice restores power. There is a Stoic practice that sounds simple but is deeply transformative. Delay. When anger rises, do nothing. No response. No message. No confrontation. Just time. Anger weakens quickly when starved of action. Most anger needs immediacy to survive. Give it time. Right. And it reveals how small it really is. Another practice, reframe the offender. Ask yourself, did they act out of ignorance, fear, habit? Not to excuse, but to understand. Understanding dissolves rage. You don't rage at a storm. You don't take betrayal personally from nature, seeing human behavior as flawed. But natural reduces the sense of personal attack. Anger thrives on personalization. Remove it, and anger starves. Stoicism doesn't ask you to tolerate injustice silently. It asks you to act without losing yourself. Firmness without fury. Boundaries without bitterness. You can correct without exploding. You can walk away without hatred. That balance is rare. That's why it's powerful. Imagine a life where anger no longer controls your tone, your decisions, your relationships, where insults fall flat, delays don't ruin your day, provocation fails. That doesn't make you passive. It makes you untouchable, because nothing outside can force you to abandon your values. The Stoics believed anger was optional suffering, and suffering that is optional is unnecessary. This doesn't mean anger will never appear. It means it won't own you. It becomes a signal. It's not a commander. A moment, not a personality, and that changes everything. In the next part, we'll face an emotion that is quieter than anger, but often more destructive: fear. For fear, the invisible cage. Fear rarely announces itself. It doesn't always feel dramatic or intense. Most of the time it feels reasonable. Caution, hesitation, overthinking. You tell yourself you're being smart, prepared, realistic. But look closely. How many of your choices are guided not by intention, but by avoidance? Avoiding failure, avoiding embarrassment, avoiding discomfort, avoiding uncertainty. Fear doesn't need to stop you completely. It only needs to slow you down. It convinces you to wait, to delay, to stay where you are just a little longer. And years pass. The Stoics understood fear not as a response to danger, but as a response to imagination. Epictetus was clear about this. It is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about events. Fear is the mind rehearsing pain that has not yet arrived. Most of what you fear never happens. Most of what does happen is never as bad as imagined. Yet the emotional cost is paid in advance. Your body reacts as if the threat is real. Your heart tightens. Your thoughts race. Your confidence shrinks. And all of it is fueled by a future that exists only in your mind. Think about how much energy fear consumes. The conversations you rehearse, the outcomes you imagine, the failures you relive before they occur. Fear demands attention constantly, and the more attention you give it, the more convincing it becomes. The Stoics didn't deny fear, they exposed it. They asked questions. Fear hates. What exactly am I afraid of? What is the worst realistic outcome? Can I survive that? Most fears collapse under examination. They thrive in vagueness. Fear likes generalities. This could go badly. I might fail. They might judge me. Stoicism forces specificity. What does badly mean? What does fail look like? Who is they? When you name the fear clearly, it shrinks. Seneca advised practicing adversity in advance, not to suffer twice, but to reduce shock. If you've already imagined the worst calmly, it loses power over you. Most people avoid thinking about loss. The Stoics faced it deliberately. They reflected on loss, rejection, death not morbidly, but honestly. Because when you accept impermanence, fear loosens its grip. Fear thrives on attachment to outcomes, to success, to reputation, to comfort. The more you cling, the more fear grows. Stoicism invites detachment, not apathy. You still act. You still care. But you release the demand that things must go a certain way. That release is freedom, fear says. If this goes wrong, I won't be okay, Stoicism replies. If it goes wrong, I will respond. That difference changes everything. Fear wants guarantees. Life offers none. So the Stoics stopped negotiating with uncertainty. They accepted it, and in doing so, they became resilient. Think about the fear of judgment. How many choices are shaped by how you might appear? You edit yourself. You hold back opinions. You avoid risks. Not because you don't want something, but because you don't want to be seen failing. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that most people are too absorbed in themselves to think about you for long. Judgment is fleeting. Regret lasts. Fear keeps you small by pretending it's protecting you. But protection that prevents growth is confinement. Fear also feeds on identity. If I fail, that means I am a failure. If I'm rejected, that means I am unworthy. Stoicism dismantles this. An outcome does not define you. It informs you. Failure is feedback, not a verdict. Fear disappears when identity loosens. When you stop needing success to prove your worth, Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you want nothing that can be taken from you. Reputation can be taken. Status can be taken. Comfort can be taken. Character cannot, unless you give it away. Fear loses power when you root your worth internally, not in approval, but in conduct. Not in results, but in effort. When fear arises, Stoicism doesn't say be brave. It says, be clear. Clear about what matters. Clear about what's in your control. Clear about what you can endure. Humans can endure far more than fear allows them to believe. Most limits are imagined, fear says. Don't try, you might fail. Stoicism replies, try and, if you fail, remain intact. That mindset is unstoppable. Fear can't control someone who has accepted uncertainty. Someone who knows they can adapt. You don't eliminate fear by force. You weaken it by action. Small, deliberate exposure. Doing the thing despite uncertainty. Speaking despite doubt. Moving despite discomfort. Each time you act without obeying fear, fear loses credibility. Over time, it becomes background noise, still present, no longer commanding. Imagine a life where fear no longer dictates your pace, where you move deliberately, speak honestly, choose growth over comfort, not recklessly, but freely. That's Stoic courage, not loud, not dramatic, quiet, consistent, unshakable. In the next part, we'll confront something even more subtle: attachment. 5. Attachment. Why holding on creates pain. Attachment feels like love, like commitment, like caring deeply. But often, it is fear wearing a softer mask. The fear of losing, the fear of change, it's the fear of emptiness. You tell yourself you're attached because something matters. Maybe true, but the Stoics asked a harder question. At what cost? Because the tighter you hold, the more pain you feel when life moves, and life always moves. Nothing stays exactly as it is. People change, roles end, success fades, bodies age. This is not pessimism, it's reality. Most suffering comes not from loss itself, but from the refusal to accept that loss is part of existence. Epictetus was uncomfortably direct about this. He advised people to love with awareness of impermanence, not to withdraw, but to remember that what you cherish is not owned, it is entrusted. Most people live as if things belong to them permanently. My relationship, my position, my image, my life as it should be. And when something shifts, they feel betrayed. But betrayed by whom? Life never promised permanence. Attachment turns change into trauma. The Stoics did not avoid love, ambition, or joy. They avoided dependency. The difference matters. Dependency says, I cannot be okay without this. Stoicism says, I prefer this but I remain whole without it. That mindset protects the heart without closing it. Attachment often hides an identity. You don't just want success, you need it to prove something. You don't just want love, you need it to feel complete. You don't just want recognition, you need it to feel valuable. And so your peace becomes conditional. If things go well, you're okay. If they don't, you collapse. That is not strength. That is emotional leverage handed to the world. Marcus Aurelius warned himself repeatedly not to tie his sense of worth to what can be taken. He ruled an empire, yet reminded himself daily that power, praise, and position were temporary. Not because he rejected them, because he refused to be owned by them. Attachment narrows your world. You start protecting instead of growing. Clinging instead of adapting. You become afraid to speak honestly, to take risks, to let things change, because change threatens what you're holding. But everything you're holding is already changing. The Stoics found peace by aligning with this truth instead of resisting it. They practiced what we now call negative visualization, imagining loss not to suffer, but to soften attachment. If you can imagine losing something calmly, you can hold it more lightly while you have it. That lightness doesn't reduce love, it deepens appreciation. You stop taking moments for granted, you stop assuming permanence. You start meeting life with gratitude instead of demand. Attachment often shows up in relationships. You want people to behave a certain way, to remain who they were, to meet your expectations. But people evolve when they don't match the image in your mind. Frustration and resentment grow. Stoicism teaches you to separate the person from your expectation of them. Love the person as they are. Release the fantasy of control. That release saves relationships. Attachment also shows up in outcomes. You work hard and demand a specific result. When reality chooses differently, you feel cheated. Stoicism reframes effort. You control the input, not the output. Your job is to act with integrity, focus, and persistence. The outcome is not your possession. This doesn't make effort. It's meaningless. It makes it cleaner. You stop tying your self-worth to things outside your authority, and that brings relief. One of the deepest attachments is to identity. The story you tell yourself about who you are. I am the successful one. I am the strong one. I am the one who never fails. Life eventually challenges these stories when identity cracks. People panic, but identity is flexible by nature. Stoicism encourages fluidity. You are not your role. You are not your past. You are not your reputation. You are your choice's moment. By moment, letting go of rigid identity creates resilience. You adapt instead of break. Attachment creates fear. Fear creates control. Control creates suffering. Release reverses the cycle. This doesn't mean becoming careless. It means becoming free. Free to act without desperation. Free to love without possession. Free to lose without losing yourself. Imagine being able to say, I value this deeply, but I am not destroyed if it changes. That sentence alone ends countless forms of suffering. The Stoics believe that as true wealth is wanting little from what you cannot control, that doesn't shrink life, it expands it. Because when you're no longer clinging, you're open to growth, open to change, open to reality as it unfolds. In the next part, we'll face something even quieter: expectations. 6 expectations, the quiet source of disappointment. Most of your pain does not come from what happens. It comes from what you expected to happen. Expectations are silent contracts you make with life. You don't announce them. You don't write them down. You barely notice them. But you feel them the moment they're broken. You expected appreciation. You expected fairness. You expected progress by now. You expected people to understand you. And when reality fails to deliver, disappointment rushes in, not loud like anger, not sharp like fear, but heavy, draining, persistent. The Stoics saw expectations as one of the most dangerous habits of the mind because they feel harmless, even positive, hopeful even. But hope tied to certainty is fragile. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people would be ungrateful, dishonest, selfish, not because he was cynical, but because he refused to be surprised. Surprise is what turns events into emotional wounds. When you expect ease, difficulty feels like injustice. When you expect recognition, silence feels like rejection. When you expect life to reward effort fairly, setbacks feel personal, but life does not operate on expectations. It operates on cause, chance, and complexity. Expectations turn reality into a negotiation, and reality never signs the contract. Think about how often disappointment appears in your life. A message you hoped for, a result you believed was deserved. A person who didn't show up the way you imagined. The pain is not the event. It's the gap between what is, what you believed should be. Stoicism closes that gap, not by lowering standards, but by aligning perception with reality. Expectations often come from comparison. You look around and think, they're ahead of me. They have it easier. They got what I wanted. Comparison creates an invisible timeline, a belief that life owes you certain milestones by certain ages. When reality doesn't cooperate, you feel behind. But behind what? An imaginary schedule based on selective observation. The Stoics rejected this entirely. They measured life not by progress relative to others, but by alignment with values. Are you acting with integrity? Are you improving your judgment? Are you responding wisely? Those metrics never expire. Expectations also poison relationships. You expect people to behave logically, to communicate clearly, to meet your emotional needs intuitively when they don't. Resentment builds, but people are not extensions of your mind. They carry their own fears, limitations, and blind spots. Stoicism doesn't ask you to tolerate mistreatment. It asks you to release unrealistic demands, demanding that others be different. It's one of the fastest ways to suffer. Epictetus put it simply: don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do. This is not surrender, it's alignment. When you stop arguing with reality, you conserve enormous energy. Energy you can use to respond instead of resent. Expectations about yourself are often the harshest. You expect constant motivation, perfect discipline, unbroken progress. When you fall short, self-criticism begins. You replay mistakes. Question your worth. Stoicism replaces self-judgment with self-observation. Instead of saying, I failed, you say, I learned something. Instead of demanding perfection, you aim for improvement. Progress is uneven. Growth is nonlinear. Expecting consistency from a human mind is unrealistic. The Stoics allowed themselves to be human without abandoning standards. They focused on effort, not outcome. Expectations about the future create anxiety. You imagine scenarios, plan outcomes, attach emotions to possibilities. When reality diverges, you feel destabilized. Stoicism trains presence. Not because the future doesn't matter, but because it doesn't exist yet. Living emotionally in the future robs the present of clarity. Seneca warned that people suffer more in imagination than in reality. Expectation is imagination with entitlement, it says. I've already decided how this should go. Reality rarely agrees. The Stoic approach is flexible intention. You aim, you act. You adapt, no rigidity. No emotional collapse when plans change. Expectations turn preferences into demands, and demands create disappointment. Preferences allow peace. I would like this outcome. It's very different from I need this outcome to be okay. That distinction is everything. Imagine approaching life with openness instead of expectation. You prepare, but don't assume. You hope, but don't cling. You act, but don't demand. Disappointment loses its edge. You're no longer shocked. By resistance, you meet obstacles with curiosity instead of frustration. That shift changes how life feels. You stop asking, why didn't this go my way? Start asking, what is required of me now? That question restores agency. Stoicism teaches you to expect difficulty, not pessimistically, realistically. When difficulty arrives, you're ready. When ease appears, you're grateful. This creates emotional stability. You are no longer riding emotional highs and lows. Based on how closely life matches your expectations, you become steady, grounded, clear. The Stoics believed that peace is not found by arranging the world perfectly, but by arranging your expectations honestly. Release the demand that life be easy. Release the belief that effort guarantees reward. Release is the idea that others should behave exactly as you wish, and something remarkable happens. Life becomes lighter, not because it's easier, but because you're no longer fighting it. And the final part will bring everything together. Control, emotion, anger, fear, attachment. 7. The untouchable mind. Most of your pain does not come from what happens. It comes from what you expected to happen. Expectations are silent contracts you make with life. You don't announce them. You don't write them down. You barely notice them, but you feel them the moment they're broken. You expected appreciation. You expected fairness. You expected progress by now. You expected people to understand you. And when reality fails to deliver, disappointment rushes in. Not loud like anger, not sharp like fear, but heavy, draining, persistent. The Stoics saw expectations as one of the most dangerous habits of the mind because they feel harmless, even positive, hopeful, even. But hope tied to certainty is fragile. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that people would be ungrateful, dishonest, selfish, not because he was cynical, but because he refused to be surprised. Surprise is what turns events into emotional wounds. When you expect ease, difficulty feels like injustice. When you expect recognition, silence feels like rejection. When you expect life to reward effort fairly, setbacks feel personal. But life does not operate on expectations. It operates on cause, chance, and complexity. Expectations turn reality into a negotiation, and reality never signs the contract. Think about how often disappointment appears in your life. A message you hoped for. A result you believed was deserved. A person who didn't show up the way you imagined. The pain is not the event. It's the gap between what is and what you believed should be. Stoicism closes that gap. Not by lowering standards, but by aligning perception with reality. Expectations often come from comparison. You look around and think, they're ahead of me. They have it easier. They got what I wanted. Comparison creates an invisible timeline, a belief that life owes you certain milestones by certain ages, When reality doesn't cooperate, you feel behind. But behind what? An imaginary schedule based on selective observation. The Stoics rejected this entirely. They measured life not by progress relative to others, but by alignment with values. Are you acting with integrity? Are you improving your judgment? Are you responding wisely? Those metrics never expire. Expectations also poison relationships. You expect people to behave logically, to communicate clearly, to meet your emotional needs intuitively when they don't. Resentment builds, but people are not extensions of your mind. They carry their own fears, limitations, and blind spots. Stoicism doesn't ask you to tolerate mistreatment. It asks you to release unrealistic demands, demanding that others be different. It's one of the fastest ways to suffer. Epictetus put it simply: don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do. This is not surrender, it's alignment. When you stop arguing with reality, you can conserve enormous energy. Energy you can use to respond instead of resent. Expectations about yourself are often the harshest. You expect constant motivation, perfect discipline, unbroken progress. When you fall short, self-criticism begins. You replay mistakes, label yourself, question your worth. Stoicism replaces self-judgment with self-observation. Instead of saying, I failed, you say, I learned something. Instead of demanding perfection, you aim for improvement. Progress is uneven. Growth is nonlinear, expecting consistency from a human mind is unrealistic. The Stoics allowed themselves to be human without abandoning standards. They focused on effort, not outcome. Expectations about the future create anxiety. You imagine scenarios, plan outcomes, attach emotions to possibilities. When reality diverges, you feel destabilized. Stoicism trains presence, not because the future doesn't matter, but because it doesn't exist yet. Living emotionally in the future robs the present of clarity. Seneca warned that people suffer more in imagination than in reality. Expectation is imagination with entitlement. It says, I've already decided how this should go. Reality rarely agrees. The Stoic approach is flexible intention. You aim, you act. You adapt, no rigidity. No emotional collapse when plans change. Expectations turn preferences into demands, and demands create disappointment. Preferences allow peace. I would like this outcome is very different from I need this outcome to be okay. That distinction is everything. Imagine approaching life with openness. Instead of expectation, you prepare but don't assume. You hope but don't cling. You act but don't demand. Disappointment loses its edge. You're no longer shocked. By resistance, you meet obstacles with curiosity instead of frustration. That shift changes how life feels. You stop asking, why didn't this go my way? And start asking, what is required of me now? That question restores agency. Stoicism teaches you to expect difficulty, not pessimistically, realistically. When difficulty arrives, you're ready. When ease appears, you're grateful. This creates emotional stability. You are no longer riding emotional highs and lows based on how closely life matches your expectations. You become steady, grounded, clear. The Stoics believed that peace is not found by arranging the world perfectly, but by arranging your expectations honestly. Release the demand that life be easy. Release the belief that effort guarantees reward. Release the idea that others should behave exactly as you wish, and something remarkable happens. Life becomes lighter, not because it's easier, but because you're no longer fighting it. In the final part, we'll bring everything together. Control, emotion, anger, fear, attachment, asterisk, 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 asterisk. 7. The untouchable mind.